What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we've got some new Untamed cards which are going to be coming around in Worlds Collide, and we need to have a look at them. So we're going to. Starting with one of my favourite cards that I've seen from Worlds Collide so far, Imprinted Murmook. Also, right, you can see it next to a person there. That is a big crab. Don't know how it's only 3 power, but it is. 3 power, 0 armor. And at this point, like myself, most of you are probably going, hang on a second, haven't we already had Murmook? Yes, we have. And you'll be delighted to hear, or at least if you like fun little things as much as I do, you'll be delighted to hear that it works very much like a slightly different Murmook. You see, Murmook increased the cost of your opponent's keys by 1. Imprinted Murmook reduces the cost of your keys by 1. I adore this. As a side note, it's also got elusive, so your opponent cannot just straight knock it out. They need to break the elusive and then knock it out. And it is a 3 power, just like regular Murmook. And it has no armor, just like regular Murmook. But having elusive is brilliant. Your keys cost 1 less amber to forge. Now, this is really important, because there are like a million different ways we've been given to increase the cost of your opponent forging a key. I know they're not going to be in Worlds Collide other than coming through as legacy cards, which incidentally has been confirmed, but back in Worlds Collide we had Jammer Pack and Grabber Jammer. We've got the aforementioned Murmook. We had Lash of Broken Dreams that came around for Dis back in Call of the Archons. And then Sanctum had another lovely artifact in Age of Ascension. It had Proclamation 346E, which increased the cost of forging by 2 unless you had creatures on the field of all 3 of your houses. And let's not forget Grump Buggy, or as I like to call it, the card that ruined Poland. That Voltor was so difficult to commentate with all the Grump Buggies around. Grump Buggy is a 2-sided card that basically says each player pays 1 more amber to forge a key for each of their opponent's creatures with power 5 or higher, which ironically would not include Murmook. And of course, we did see a deck that had that with Iron Obelisk as well. An Iron Obelisk says your opponent's keys cost +1 amber for each friendly damaged Brobnar creature. And when you start combining both of them into one deck, you end up with an extremely awkward game to try and figure out how much keys actually cost. But in terms of reducing the cost of forging keys, we've not had very much. The one that springs to mind is Titan Mechanic, but the important thing about Titan Mechanic is it's a 2-sided card. Titan Mechanic reads, while it's on a flank, each key costs -1 amber. That is both yours and your opponent's. Whereas Imprinted Murmook reads, your keys cost 1 less amber. Incidentally, in the UK, we do have chocolate bars called Yorkies, so expect all British people to make a joke out of this, because we will make a joke out of anything we do think we're extremely funny. Just like Yorkie did with their famous It's Not For Girls campaign, which was really funny up until they got into a lot of trouble. Man, now I really want a Yorkie. The point is, this is one of very few cards that we've got that reduce the cost of your keys. Is this going to be a theme? Is this going to keep happening now? We've seen a lot of cards that increase the cost of forging, very few that decrease. And the more cards we've got that decrease the cost of forging, the shorter and faster games are going to be. Is that something the designers want? I honestly don't know. But the thing to remember is they've gone on record saying they do not want a rotation. So might we have a set in the future where in that one set keys are far faster to forge and that set becomes overpowered? Certainly Imprinted Murmook is a common. We've all seen decks with 4 or 5 of the same common. What if you get 4 copies of Imprinted Murmook in a deck, and then your keys are costing 2 to forge? That seems like a crazy good deck. What I will say is, we know that the algorithm does correct for things like this. So if we take Tesmal as an example from Age of Ascension, when you reap, you get to choose one of your opponent's houses and then not allowed to pick it next turn. It is limited to 2 per deck. so that you cannot have free out and lock your opponent out of the game. Similarly, Binding Irons is a card that gives your opponent free chains. That is also limited to 2 per deck, because actually, when it comes down to it, we don't want our opponent in chains for the entire game. Personally, I want a 4 Binding Irons, 4 Imprinted Murmook deck. Let's roll, ladies and gentlemen. Let's roll. Now, we do have another creature we need to look at. It is Deepwood Druid. And not unlike Imprinted Murmook, we're looking 3 power, 0 armor. And it's got that keyword skill that came around in Age of Ascension, Deploy. Just means that rather than having to put it on one end of your battle line when it comes into play, you can put it wherever you like. And it has a skill that says, when you play or when you reap, but not fight, fully heal a neighbouring creature. It's, I almost want to say, aggressively fine. It's not particularly powerful as a free power. There's no armor, no elusive, etc., etc. So it's not going to last all that long. It's just not. The way I see this, right, when I'm looking at my opponent's battle line and I'm trying to decide, all right, which creature do I want to take out? This is low down my list. Now, if you can get this next to something like Gargantodon, for instance. I'm mentioning Gargantodon in a lot of videos lately, but it's 16 power, it's huge, yeah. It's worth bringing up in a bunch of videos. If you can get this down next to a Gargantodon, yes! Because you've got 16 power, you don't get destroyed, this heals, and you kind of go Saurian, and you do a bunch of stuff, and you use Gargantodon. Bearing in mind, right, Gargantodon's got that beautiful skill that each amber that would be stolen is captured instead. Great if your opponent wants to steal, bad if you want to steal. But if you can do that and be healing it, that's brilliant. Or maybe, and we don't know if it's going to be in the set because we don't have a set list for Worlds Collide yet, but maybe something like Lollop the Titanic if you've got Brobnar, 11 power creature. And then you just completely heal it. This can be really good. And the fact that it's got Deploy is huge, because it means that you can put it down next to a Lollop the Titanic or a Gargantodon, regardless of where those creatures currently sit in your battle line. I don't dislike it. It's only really good in decks where you've got big creatures that you want to keep alive. And even if you're in a deck that's got big creatures that you really want to keep alive, even in that scenario, ladies and gentlemen, you still have to face the fact that maybe it's not going to be there, because it's still a free power creature. You can play it and heal once, and that really does me save it. If this was just a reap skill, I'd probably go so far as to call it a bad card. It's a play and a reap skill, which is fine. But is it really going to stay around? Honestly, I think it might stay around just because your opponent's not going to be terribly scared of it. With the annoying reality being, if you've got something like a Gargantodon or a Lollop the Titanic, and you do deploy this next to them, and bearing in mind, right, you're not always going to be able to deploy it when they're damaged. A lot of the time you'll deploy it when they're undamaged, ready for when they are damaged. But even if you do, your opponent's just going to take it out. Because then they'll finally want to, and they'll be able to, because it's free power with no elusive. I don't dislike this card per se, I just don't think it's terribly good. We also finally got a nice clear view of Giant Gnawbill. We did talk about this earlier, so I'm not going to go into huge detail here. 5 power is kind of good for Untamed. No armor is fine. After a player chooses an active house, that player destroys an artifact of that house. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned Grump, Buggy, and Iron Obelisk earlier. So if you're playing against Brobnar and your opponent's got those, you play this down, your opponent chooses Brobnar. Yes! Outside of that, it could be really bad, right? Because essentially, if you've got any Shadows artifacts, you can't go Giant Gnawbill, put it down, and then choose Shadows, because you'll destroy your own artifacts. So there are going to be a bunch of games where you don't even want to play this. This is going to be one of those creatures that gets discarded a bunch. But if you're against a deck which is heavy on artifacts, this is really good, because this is going to wreck them. So, you know, kind of good, kind of bad, I suppose. What I do like is it is a permanent skill. So if your opponent is playing Brobnar and it looks like they're going Brobnar next turn, and they've got an Iron Obelisk and a Grunt Buggy down, and then you play this, they have got to immediately destroy one of those two. That does at least make me happy. It's nice artifact control, but you're going to need to be extremely careful to make sure that you don't end up destroying your own artifacts by accident. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That's what I think about all these new Untamed cards, but I would be very interested to hear your opinion. So let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, be nice, and then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where we talk about a whole bunch of games, like Keyforge, and any others that take my fancy. Oh yeah, and the most important thing, this is very important, look after yourselves till next time. And do check out the Patreon if you feel so inclined. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.